All right, so I think we will get started. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining the session today. Today we have like us, so me and also the Rohit, our attorneys. So the Rohit is an immigration attorney, and he is joining us today to share his thought from the legal expert perspective. So the topic today is relevant to the crafting a winning EB1A strategy for industry professional. Yes. So yeah, just to give everyone the head up that the for any question we will reserve those questions to answer at the end, but make sure that you can get the link on the chat site, and also you can scan this QR code here and then type your question. So if any question are similar to what you think you want to ask, you can upvote that question. We may not be able to go through all the question, but we will pick the most relevant. So we will reserve about like 10 to 15 minutes to answer the question. And yeah, so I just want to introduce myself first. So my name is Mint, and I am the a recipient of EB1A and NIW green card back in 2021, and I used to have the 2 times O1A visa as well. My background is an entrepreneur, and then since I got the green card back in 2021, I joined Paul. So Paul created a group on Facebook back in 2021, and but that Facebook group is more toward like helping Thai people to educate them, sharing all the resources for EB1A and NIW green card. So we we kind of like help people, many people, maybe like 70 or something people. And also right now at this moment, we have about like 14K members in that Facebook group. So the I also turned this passion to become a business this year. The company called Pathvera. So we would like to educate and empower high skill professional for the like to the pathway to become a permanent resident here in the US through the self-sponsored green card option. And yeah, so for our guest speaker, Rohit, so I would like you, Rohit, can you introduce yourself a little bit so people can, learn more about you, about your expertise. I know that the you have expertise in, like specializing in helping high skill professional navigating the high skill visa like O1A and also self-sponsored green card like EB1A and NIW.
Yes. Thank you, Mint. Nice to meet you all. Yes, my name is Rohit Srinivasa. I'm an immigration attorney, largely in business immigration, where for the better part of a decade, been practicing largely within the space of high-skilled immigration, which includes, of course, the O1A, which is a non-immigrant visa, the EB1A for extraordinary ability, and the NIW, of course, for exceptional or advanced degree folks doing something that's very nationally important or considered to be largely. But of course, we are a full service law firm, so we do handle a lot of other things as well. But primarily, a lot of our client base has been within these fields, and I'm excited to speak to you guys today about what as Mint is comparing this presentation. And I'm happy to speak about some of the topics that are especially relevant today with the EB1A, considering there are a lot of applications and the demand is pretty high.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. So the I just want to, I know that I think maybe some of the people here already know about EB1A, some may not. So I would like to provide some more contact briefly about the self-sponsored green card option. So for me as the a professional, so I think the once I know about this option, I think it's one of the fastest and provide flexibility for like professional like us to to become a permanent resident, and also there is no need to have employers sponsor us. And this is a great option to kind of like build more stable life here in the US while we continue working here as well. Yeah, so Rohit, do you have anything to add for this part as well from lawyer perspective, or it's all good?
This is correct. I want to add something though. Here, you're right. There's no employer sponsorship needed, meaning that you don't have to have a job offer. However, that being said, though, whether it's the EB2NIW especially or EB1A to a certain extent, it can be pretty important to have U.S. connections if you're outside the country. Letters of interest from prospective U.S. employers in terms of how you're going to further your expertise or endeavor if it comes to the NIW. Those things can be important still, especially for the NIW, but to an extent for an EB1A as well.
Thank you for sharing your thought here. Yeah, so what is EB1A? I would like to maybe have you talk about this as well briefly about EB1A. Like I mentioned, some people may just explore this option and some people may already have that understanding.
Yeah, the EB1A is really for anybody who is at the top of their field of expertise. And the top is, some people define it as 1%, the top percentile, etc. But essentially, it's, you are at the top of your field. You're not above median. You're not above average. You're not even impressive. You are extraordinary. You're at the top and, showcased by your experience, the stuff that you've done, your features, etc. And you're right. There's no perm labor certification. It is the fastest processing time among the self-sponsored route, that we are seeing right now. I would say, for certain countries, EB5 might be still good, depending on the situation with the lag. But for the most part, yes, it is. That's correct. And of course, premium processing is available, which I recommend for the most part. And it is for everybody, artists, industry professionals, researchers, entrepreneurs who are disrupting the industry. It can truly be for anybody. Sculpture artists. We had a person who was an EB1A who was approved for doing art on coffee foam, a latte artist. So it's truly for anybody. Yeah.
Thank you so much again for sharing your thought here. Yeah, so the topic that we will discuss today is around the top EB1A criteria that most relevant to the industry professional outside of academic field. What do USCIS really look for under the specific criteria that also relevant to industry professional, like original contribution, critical role, and high salary? And also the how lawyers evaluate resume, roles, and evidence to determine EB1A potential for a specific person, and what to prepare before you start engaging with an attorney. So Rohit will talk about this and share his thought, his expertise here. Yeah, so I put together some all the criteria here for you. But yeah, so I would give this to Rohit and you can start talking about,
Yes, so sure, happy to speak about. But even before thinking about these criteria, and I wrote about this on LinkedIn. If you have not followed me, please follow. I try to write there as much as I can. The one important thing, even before thinking about any of these criteria, is thinking about your field of expertise. And I know that this might seem trivial, but this is extremely, extremely important. You want to make sure that you take inventory of your career, all of the work that you've done, maybe even as a student, to being a professional, the impactful projects. Where's the through line? Where have I had the maximum impact? And what is that field of expertise? You want to be very specific about this. You don't want to just call yourself an AI visionary. I mean, that, you can't really distinguish yourself from others. Or you don't want to be too narrow and call yourself something extremely narrow where we can't leverage all of your experience. You want to be really thoughtful in the way you prepare. And when you're talking to an attorney, you really want to make sure that you're able to think about this stuff when you're having a meeting with an attorney as a subject matter expert. In fact, there have been recent decisions on multidisciplinary fields getting RFEs because a person, for example, in AI, computer science, and radiology was told to have no sustained acclaim in any field, when really what they were doing was an AI expert or AI expertise within computational medicine and medical diagnostics. That should have been the way they should have framed it, but they didn't. And they got a very, very difficult RFE, which they had to eventually appeal, etc. So think about that first. And then you're right. You have to meet at least 3 criteria. We try to argue, a little bit more than that, depending on the situation. But I'd say for industry professionals, your critical role, your salary, and your original contributions will be the foundation or the bottom of the pyramid, with writing or media, things like that, coming as a result of the work that you've done.
Yeah, so now I would like maybe you can go more in depth about the each criteria that relevant to industry professional, mainly the critical role, original contribution, and also high salary.
Yes, absolutely. I think, when you're thinking about an industry professional, you're thinking about where they've had the maximum sustained acclaim. Because remember, EB1A is not just satisfying those 3 criteria. That's the first step. Eventually, you have to showcase that you have sustained acclaim in that field of expertise. And so when you look at your industry experience, your critical role or roles over the years become that catalyst in terms of showcasing that sustained acclaim. And so critical role or leading or critical role has 2 things. One is obviously you either had a leadership position that was delegating tasks of a critical capacity to your organization, or you're very critical in terms of, you had a big impact in terms of organization and the documents required for that, in terms of how much money it's made the organization, how it's disrupted a service offering of the organization to improve it, etc. But also importantly, and this is an RFE area as well, distinguished organization. So this is something where, not only should your role be critical, but it should be within a distinguished organization. Not every organization is distinguished. Right now, USCIS is cracking down on a lot of IT consulting firms, small level firms where people work for that employer. Maybe they work for prestigious end clients, but USCIS is saying, hey, this firm is not that big or not that great. But of course, if you work in a public company, things that have a lot of media attention, obviously things that have gotten funding from famous VC, etc., it's a startup, those types of documents will be required to showcase that not only are you critical, but also working for a distinguished organization. So that's really important. You have to inventory your work. Letters of recommendation can be important, but not the sole factor. In fact, you want independent evidence. It could be as simple as screenshots of emails, work that you've done on projects that's redacted, people praising you within the company, your superiors, screenshots of that, Slack shoutouts, anything that you can use to showcase that you're critical on major impact stuff within the organization will be very useful, so that when you do get those reference letters, they can add context to that independent piece of evidence. Don't rely solely on letters of recommendation that's considered hearsay, somebody offering something to assert the truth of the matter. And is it not exactly USCIS can cross-examine this individual to verify the authenticity. So they want to see exceptions to hearsay, which is business records, emails, things that are not created for the purpose of EB1A. That's very important for critical role. And now with the critical role as internal, you move on to original contributions, which is external. What have you done for the company that's had a major impact on the outside? So for example, the other day I was speaking to somebody in Google, and this individual works in the search function, and essentially he shaved off a couple of milliseconds off of search, right? Seems very, very small, or maybe nanoseconds. But when you aggregate that among the millions or billions of users of Google, or even a single user using Google for hundreds of hours, how much time have they saved? How much time is saved in the aggregate? Probably years, hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years when you look at the sheer number. And what does that mean in terms of productivity? What is that delta from the time that person entered to right now in terms of how much savings of time and productivity that this individual has been a part of? That's that delta, that's the original contribution, and that's that metric we have to specify to USCIS in showcasing, hey, where was the situation of the service or application when I entered, and where is it today, and what was my contribution, right? So it comes from you, it has to be novel, right? Something different than what was previously there. And of course, it has to have had major significance. So a patent is a good way to showcase originality that came from you and it's novel. But of course, the licensing of the patent, where it's been used, etc., showcases the contributions of major significance. And of course, finally, high salary. I don't want to touch on this too much. You either have it or you don't. This is something where we use data from government sources. If it's a foreign country, foreign government sources as best as we can, maybe private sources. We want to use things that are actually advantageous to you. We don't necessarily want to use levels.fyi, and all that, because that could really hurt you if you're not in one of the bigger companies. So we try to use that advantageously, but this is something that is unique to each individual profession. You use occupational codes, etc., for that role. And I will write more about this. I've written about this, but essentially, that's a catalyst, or that's a result of you having a critical role and contributing originally.
Yeah, so Rohit, I have like one question that I think I got asked often as well for the critical role. Do you have to be a manager level, like at least, or the senior level would be fine as well? For example, like senior software engineer, something like that. Is that enough to prove that that role is critical? Like, is it enough for the title?
Yeah. So there is two things within this. It's, I think if you're familiar with the L1, you have the L1 managers, and then you have the L1 specialized employees. So in this case, obviously, if you're a leading role and have an org chart where you have a bunch of people below you and reporting to higher ups who are C-suite executives or executives in general, then you have a leading role, which also counts. But you can also be very critical, meaning that you could be a very, very specialized, engineer, a staff engineer even, who is doing critical things. For example, that individual I showcased, gave the example in Google, who was on a millisecond. He's not exactly a senior person in that, but he's very, very critical to a very specific project that the organization is known for in terms of search. So it kind of relates to that original contributions in terms of showcasing what led up to that role being critical in terms of the contributions they've made internally. So that can be a critical role. People in R&D, engineers can totally satisfy a critical role. Obviously, the more experience you have, the better the argument is. If you have an org chart showcasing who you report to and who you maybe manage, that's also a nice thing to have. But it doesn't have to be somebody who's really, really senior.
Yeah, thank you. Another question is related to maybe original contribution, because there are people, industry professionals, sometimes their work is more internal and they cannot, it's often like they think it's hard for them to gather evidence internally to claim that that is their work, something like that, because sometimes there is the team of effort as well. So how do you think about this?
Right. So evidence is very important for USCIS. The standard is something called preponderance of evidence. That means more likely than not. For example, in a criminal trial, if you're trying to get somebody convicted, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. That means 99, 100%. This is 50% or more, or 51% or more, preponderance of evidence. So, and it's also circumstantial, meaning that, obviously USCIS officers not following you around to seeing how critical you are, etc. And so you have to showcase some evidence that makes them feel like, okay, more likely than not, this person actually did this, what they're claiming to do. Now, letters of recommendation is a very lazy way of doing it. If that's all you use, somebody just saying something, hey, this person said that, believe them. USCIS doesn't like to see that. It's considered hearsay. They can't verify that language, and so you have to showcase simple things. It could be as simple as I mentioned as a Slack shout out. It could be redacted. You could redact things if it's of a sensitive nature. You have to see what you can share. And I encourage people who are working right now to consider collating their evidence as we speak, because sometimes it's difficult because you might leave that company, you may not have access to a lot of that stuff. And that's the difference between you, who just may be using letters of recommendation, and somebody else who has really took the time to maybe save some emails, redact things, use presentations that they've done or delegated tasks to other people, save certain internal shout outs or praise, whatever it is. That individual will obviously be a differentiator. That will have a differentiating factor to you who has just used a bunch of letters. And unfortunately, we are seeing more RFEs for over-reliance on letters of recommendation. And so you have to consider on how best, and you have to be creative this way, and you have to help your attorneys if you're using one with this.
Yeah, thank you. There is another one that sometimes, people receive an award, like similar to employee award or something like that, will that type of evidence or award helpful to use it as a part of evidence for original contribution or maybe critical role?
It can definitely critical role, possibly original contributions as well. Remember, original contributions tends to be things that have happened on that's resulted on the outside. How have you helped the outside? But yes, it can definitely be used for critical role. Any internal employee awards, any shout outs like that, definitely save it. And then you can use letters of recommendation to provide context as to what that award was for, what that resulted in, etc. This has to be a game of connect the dots with as much evidence as you can, and the letter of recommendation should sort of tie that all in with specificities. That's really important. Of course, most firms, including ours, draft letters of recommendation from scratch. We like to do that because we want to make sure that it's very specific in terms of how the individual knows this person, as well as, of course, the specifics as to the contributions. But those types of awards are very useful.
Yeah, thank you. I actually would like to go back to the list of criteria again, if you don't mind. So I have a question because there are like people that industry professional also targeting to work on the opportunities like scholarly article or research publication. I would like to hear your thought on if they look forward to work on these type of activities, is that will be helpful for industry professional to kind of like develop their profile, or what do you think about that, or what would be the best or possible option way to do for industry professional? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I think they should do it, and we encourage them to do it. However, as I spoke about right in the beginning, identify your field of expertise because of your critical role or roles over the years. Find that common through line and expertise, and that's what you should be writing about. That's what you should be reviewing if you're doing peer review. That's what you should be speaking about. You really have to showcase to USCIS that you are making an impact in whatever criteria you're trying to satisfy, that all maps to your field of expertise. That probably is your critical role at some level if you're an industry expert. And so, yes, I encourage that. Make sure that it's, good journals that's indexed. There are a lot of predatory journals out there. If it's too good to be true, if they're charging you a lot, if it's 24-hour peer review, be careful about that. I have some resources I might share with you after this comment in terms of finding resources and things like that. But I encourage that definitely because it's also a great way to showcase not only the fact that you're satisfying authorship, but also you're providing your expertise to respected peers in your field.
Yeah, thank you. So any other criteria that beside the top 3 one that we just discussed for critical role, original contribution, and high salary that is also relevant to industry professional, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think there's any set number. At least, when I consider industry professionals, I like to try to argue 5 at least. And that is, of course, these 3, which is critical role, original contributions, and high salary, ideally. I really like to see high salary because nobody pays you if you're not doing something special. It's not something you can profile build on, frankly. And then, of course, authorship, as you just mentioned, and judging. These tend to be some of the easiest or lowest hanging fruit in terms of satisfying the EB1A criteria. But just because it's the lowest hanging fruit doesn't mean you go out there and do some random hackathon and call it a day, or write in some low value journal or Medium or something like that and call it a day. You should try your best to try to secure as high quality as you can, but you should do those things. I also encourage people to speak because, as I mentioned, it's not about satisfying these 3 criteria anymore. You can satisfy 3, 4, 5 and still get denied on final merits for lack of leadership, lack of acclaim, lack of being in the top percentile. And so speaking, public recognition, podcasts, webinars like this, all of these things where you're talking about that expertise, which I brought up right in the beginning, can showcase that, hey, you're a gatekeeper, you're an expert. People want to listen to you. People like to read what you wrote, things like that. That's very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it might be maybe my last question on this criteria part. So there are also some people who like even they satisfy the criteria at least 3 out of 10 or more, but they still fail final merit part. I just want you to maybe share your thought on this as well on the why what make the people like fail that final merit and what USCIS look for on that part.
So a couple of things, right? As you know, tons of people are applying for EB1A right now. It's I think 13 or 15,000 Q1 applications, and that's only increasing for each quarter. That's 100% increase roughly from last year, and of course years before. So a lot of people are applying, and so people have gotten smart to seeing, hey, I can use this award to satisfy judging, or there's this low value journal, I can satisfy authorship. And then, yeah, I have some experience, and I have in this organization. Give me the EB1, and that's not the game. It's never been the game, but it's definitely not the game anymore. I think the reason that this happens is, of course, there's a lot of profile development that happens in a vacuum, and that meaning that you've worked a lot, and then all of a sudden in 1 month you've written 10 articles in a low value journal. You've done 10 hackathons or some low value pay for play awards and call it a day. USCIS says something like lack of sustained acclaim, meaning that you have not done something consistently for a certain period of time. I'm not saying you should spend years on writing or years on review, although that, always helps. But at least, you want to spend a significant amount of time consistently writing, maybe at least 6 months or something like that, writing, doing peer reviews, speaking, etc., to showcase a gradient in terms of acclaim within your profile, and hopefully, sort of elevation, in terms of your field. That's really important. Another thing is, the quality of the evidence. Somebody who writes in a much, higher quality journals is going to do fare better than low value or predatory journals that people write in. And USCIS first line in a lot of these final merits denials is the quality of the evidence matters more than the quantity. And so you want to make sure that you're leveraging the best possible organizations as possible when you're doing critical role, or when you're writing or judging and things like that. And so that's the key thing right now. But each one is very different. And also, finally, not properly crafting your expertise. As I mentioned, that person who did AI, computer science, and radiology, they got an RFE or an NOID, this notice of intent to deny on the final merit, stating that you don't have sustained acclaim in any one field, AI, radiology, or computer science. What is this? And they had to reframe that as AI expertise in computational medical diagnostics. So crafting is also very important.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I actually, yeah, so I know there is one more question, is that do you think the specific industry sector or career niche would be benefiting from another?
Like certain industries?
Yeah, for example, if that industry sector align with the US government priority, for example, emerging technology, something like that.
Definitely more so for NIWs. EB1A, but yes, for EB1A is also that can have an impact, because one of the things for the final merits of the EB1A is, is this person conceivably going to be able to continue their expertise for a significant period of time in the United States? And obviously, if you're working in a critical or emerging technology or healthcare, infrastructure, energy, these types of things will obviously give you brownie points in those final merits in terms of continuing your contributions within the United States. So it can, but it doesn't have to be. As I mentioned, if you're really famous making art on latte foam, and you have opportunities of in the United States, or you're a great filmmaker, etc., and you have opportunities in U.S. context that really feel like you're a great storyteller and have opportunities, that's fine as well. But sure, if you're in the U.S. working on these things already, you will be seen to have some merit. Of course, if you work, it's also working for great companies. FANG, that tends to, there's some brownie points if you're working for some of those companies.
Yeah, thank you. Next going to be like, can you share how the lawyer evaluate, let's say someone reach out to you, how do you determine this person are ready to move forward to engage an attorney, and for you as a lawyer to start like
Yeah,
do
that's a
that?
great question. Yeah, people do send me resumes all the time, and they don't by itself tell me a lot. I think most lawyers do this. We have our own assessment forms that we send out to people who, and then we ask them to fill that out to understand or provide more context in terms of not only the criteria, but their achievements, the career narrative. This actually becomes very important for both EB1A and especially for NIW. So we do look at that. I am looking for industry professionals. I'm looking at the type of companies that they're working for. I'm looking at the experience that they have. I'm looking at the salary gradient or improvements over the years. I'm looking at maybe patents if they have any, or I'm looking at things that they may have done within their company that's resulted on the outside. I'm also looking at the field of expertise within a certain company. I like to see people who are working in certain fields or certain expertises within certain companies that is known for that expertise. For example, if you're in Walmart, Amazon in supply chain optimization, or Google search, or Facebook Meta digital optimization in terms of ad revenue. These are things that these companies are really known for. They carve out a niche in this. And if you're working and you're a leader in that gives me a lot of pause to think about, wow, this person is really up there. So I'm looking at a lot of different things like that. Of course, where they write. I don't like to see predatory journals. I don't like to see some of these pay-for-play awards. I'm also looking at all of that stuff, and then I can kind of have an idea where they are. But I'm at least minimum looking for a couple of these things that I mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. So because you also mentioned the salary thing as well, and some people also ask me about this because sometimes they think they satisfy that high salary criteria. So do you look at the base part plus equity or bonus? Should it, how do you determine the high salary thing? Is it should be base heavily and also less of bonus or equity?
Yeah, we'd like to argue whatever is most advantageous for a client. Sometimes USCIS can be really sort of unreasonable about, only counting base or only counting. We try to do that as well. But W-2s, what they paid, what does their tax receipt say from last year is extremely probative because obviously they're getting paid that much. That can be really critical in terms of showcasing the overall number. But we do consider equity, RSUs, restricted stock units, that is, bonuses. All of those things are very relevant because they actually showcase that this person is very valuable and critical as well. And we push back against USCIS to simply sometimes say base. If you're an entrepreneur who has a lot of equity in their organization and this organization has great valuation, we actually try to get these officially appraised so that we can argue remuneration in terms of the equity that they have as well. So we try to use all of the above strategy and of course compare that to the BLS, Labor Statistics, Department of Labor, there's something called ONIT in the United States, all of these things that's advantageous to us in terms of salary. But it can be very critical for private sector industry professionals. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, so I think this is the last part, and then we will get into the Q&A. So what to prepare before you speak with an attorney?
Yeah, I think, if an attorney sends you an assessment or something like that, definitely try your best to provide, as much information as possible. That's really useful because it gives us a great, that feedback actually gives us, great context to evaluate your profile. Really think about your expertise. I think people just list their resume like they're applying for some kind of a job. And I'm not, looking to hire you. I'm looking to see, how we can make your narrative work for an EB1A. And I think they should really take some time to think about their expertise. Obviously, we have AI tools and things like that. Think about it. Use that as a guideline in terms of what does this think, where my expertise lies. Think about your major projects. Think about where you've had major impact. Think about where you could write. Think about where you could speak, organization-wise. Those types of things I really want people to really take into account because I think that when they come to an attorney, they think that, okay, do some magic or, do a miracle for me based on my resume. And that's not it. We're trying to ask you the right questions so that we can get the right answers in order to craft the right narrative. And that's what I'm looking for, to really think about all of their experience over the years and where they've had the most impact and why.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so it's like Q&A time, and just make sure that if anyone still want to enter the question, feel free to use the link on the chat, the chat box, or scan this QR code below. But we have quite some of the question, and this is the most upvoted question. So we'll go with this one first. How can I show original contribution of my work is protected by disclosure and confidentiality agreement?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. This is where, original contributions is a distinguishing, and I've spoken about this, I'll be writing more about it. It's a distinguishing criterion. The more independent evidence you can provide, obviously, the better. Now, obviously, if you're working on something like that, my hope is, maybe Apple has filed for a patent or something like that, in something that maybe has, given attribution to you. But if not, can you share something? Can you redact something? Is there anything that you can share beyond a recommendation letter? You'll have to really, really think really hard about that. Obviously, if there's a press release about the product or things like that and doesn't mention you, USCIS cannot take somebody's word for it saying, hey, you were critical to this. Even maybe an employment contract, or maybe evidence of you applying for a job that listed out the job duties, that can be probative sometimes. At least, you'll have to really think hard about what evidence you can provide, because if you're simply going to rely on letters of recommendation from your superiors, expect pushback, guaranteed, especially these days from USCIS.
Yeah, thank you. Next question is, what is the best publicly available resource to find high salary data point in specific geolocation?
Yeah, I think, typically, we use, a bunch of salary surveys. There's, EWS, ONET, DOL, BLS. You want to use things that are, and of course, your specialty occupation code, if you're in the US, you want to use something that's within your specialty occupation code, but maybe a little bit more advantageous as a code for you if it's a lower salary and if you're really paid high for that. There's a ton of things. I think this is where lawyers tend to you work with clients very closely in terms of this. But objective evidence would be your pay stubs, your W-2s, maybe your contract, that you have an official contract, and any equity listing any equities, etc. All of those things would be objective. And benchmark industry standards would be things like, as I mentioned, ONET, OEWS, DOL, BLS, Glassdoor pay scale, salary surveys, maybe Indeed.com. You can use certain private job boards as well, if it's advantageous. But it should be like the all of the above strategy. But also, very importantly, salaries don't stand in a vacuum. A critical role also follows. Salary follows critical role. So maybe what other people are paid within the company. And if you're higher up than that, and it's a distinguished organization, that could be probative as well.
Yeah, thank you. And does having an approved NIW impact the EB1A decision?
No, not by itself. I mean, in terms of a decision-making perspective, no. But having an approved NIW is great, especially for my folks who are country of birth is India or China, or even frankly the rest of the world. Just having that is nice because you don't have to worry about extending your H-1B and be it past 6 years, or having your employer sponsor you on a perm that's very, very employer dependent and you don't know what's going on. So maybe peace of mind. But that in itself, again, the EB2NIW is about the future largely. The EB1A is about your past. So original contributions, I want to make sure that also people understand, very importantly, future benefits should not be argued for original contributions. They can be a part of final merits or your personal statement, but it's about what's happened in the past. That's very important.
Yep, thank you. So I have another question as well for the people who apply for EB1A. Do they have to be, I mean, have at least, for example, 3 year, 5 year of experience in the same field? Or is there any specific number of year of experience for that person to be maybe eligible to or apply for the EB1A?
I'd say, it's very interesting. I've had really interesting clients from all over. I have noticed that some of our IT folks have had a lot more experience if they're working, especially in smaller companies, maybe 20 years. But some of our FANG EB1As have had, as little as 5, 6 years of experience. Whiz kids, I call them, getting big time salaries, working on crazy stuff like this, Meta Ray-Ban glasses and things like that, that were much younger. So I don't think there's any minimum, in terms of that. I think it's how you derive your expertise. Obviously, if you're working on cutting edge things in cutting edge companies like that, it could skew younger. Some of our entrepreneurs for EB1As have skewed in their very early 20s. After F1 on OPT, they started a company, they got funded, they got into a really competitive accelerator. Post-money valuation was huge. They got media for disrupting the industry. They applied for EB1A and, they were approved. So it's very different. I think each person has a very different lane. That's why I think it's very important to provide this information to your attorney.
Yeah, thank you. So next question, how to collect evidence for leading critical role and original contribution from, like, for your past companies? Does LOR work for this? Just LOR?
Yeah, LORs, of course, will be as high up a person as you can. If you can get it on a letterhead, great. If not, at least their tag, their role within the company, their contact information. Yes, it works. It has to be extremely specific to what you did. Somebody only they would know, in terms of knowing what they did. It cannot be just praiseworthy language. And of course, an employment contract within the company, any evidence that you actually worked for that company will help. Maybe you may not have the emails, or you may not have some of the specifics. You may not have certain information, which sucks. I will be honest. That's why I'm telling people, be very, if you're working on something good, save that. You never know when you can use it. But it has to be very specific. LORs can work. But as I mentioned, anything that you can leverage, as simple as even an employment contract, or from that job, that can at least showcase to USCIS, okay, well, at least this person, that they work there. They're not lying about that. And this individual works here and is writing a letter on a letterhead. Okay, I can make an argument. We can see that there's a presumption that this person was indeed critical in this organization.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, this is not EB1A. Okay. Wanted to know if a person can hold EB2NW and O1A in the same time.
Yeah, for sure. We have a few clients on O1A who have had their EB2NIW approved, and they're waiting for their EB2NIW priority date to get current, and they're currently working on O1 as we speak. So yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Can you share more about published material about us? What kind of content it should be, or and what type of media will be the most convincing evidence?
Yeah, you have to be very careful about this. As an industry professional, when USCIS, especially these days, when they see media, they're going to be suspicious that it's paid self-promotional PR. And in the best case scenario, you might get approved on that, which is unlikely. But the best case scenario, you might get an RFE stating, hey, this is not great media, it's self-promotional. In the worst case scenario, you might be called out for a fraud or misrepresentation that can happen. And that'll be the end of everything, not just EB1A, but your status in the US. Good luck coming back if you get tagged for fraud. So media, is not something that I would pursue unless it's very organic. It has to be a result of something that you do public facing, right? So as an industry professional, if you're working in an office somewhere, how likely is it that some media will feature you if you're not out there in the public? So if your media is a result of you speaking somewhere in an industry convention or a conference, and that garners some attention, and then you go and get somebody wants to interview you based on that speech in the public, or maybe you've written a great paper that's getting downloaded, circulated, and all of this, and then somebody wants to speak to you about that, Great. Yeah, sure. Media can be used. It has to be good media, reputable publication. It has to have an author, a date, and it has to be very probative in terms of what it's speaking in terms of your expertise. It cannot be some story about how great student you were and how small town you came from and how you're in Silicon Valley today. That's not it. It has to be very probative about your expertise.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. I actually have another question as well for the this type of evidence, maybe media or judging things, research publication. Is there any specific number of evidence that need to be submitted, or is more about quality of the outlet?
I think quality is more important. As I mentioned about writing and reviewing, you should be consistently doing that up until you submit your EB1A petition as much as possible. As far as media is concerned, I think quality is more important. As I mentioned, industry professionals don't really need to search for this media. It's been rare that we have actually used media for industry professionals personally, unless they've genuinely got it. We had a situation where somebody in Amazon was a critical team member of Alexa, and Bloomberg Technology Group or something like that, they went and visited the campus because it was so cool. It had public interest, and they were featured there for a bit. But beyond that, we don't really look into that. And I would say maybe try to at least get 2 things for each criteria if possible. But again, it's a claim which is sustained, and also which is consistency and quality.
Yeah, thank you. So that is a thing. Okay. If software was presented at an international trade show and I helped build one of the feature, could that cover display at showcase criteria? I think this is a good question as well.
Yeah, not very often industry professionals. This typically tends to be artistic exhibitions.
Yeah.
Maybe depending on the context of it, we could look into that. Typically, when we look at EB1A criteria, this tends to be about one of the a very rare ones. Speaking in a conference or presenting something in a conference, not necessarily would be an artistic thing, but maybe the software. There could maybe an argument. International trade show software is not exactly there could be some artistic viability over there. Maybe, but I would not bank on it for that being an approvable criteria. But it could add a lot of value in your final merits.
Thank you. With 3 years of experience, with 3 years experience pursuing EB1A, be advisable focus on authorship, peer review, and original contributions supported by citation of my research work. I think it's will.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're a researcher, if that's your angle, as opposed to an industry professional, your authorship will be your foundational criteria, as well as your peer review, and maybe as part of that, conferences and presenting, etc. And then, of course, what that's resulted in, who's cited you. Yes. So if you've been cited by great researchers, who are themselves stars in the field, and maybe hopefully they might be willing to write a letter of recommendation for you with specifics on how they may have used your research. Yeah, you could definitely use a lot of that as far as original contributions are concerned. But they also are a good look at the field. I wrote about this also some time ago. I think if you're in computer vision, for example, the H5 index is 440. Whereas if you're in musicology as a researcher, it's something like in the 20s, meaning that if you're in computer vision and you're cited 400 times, you might be very average. Whereas, if you're cited 50 times as in musicology, you might be the top of the field. So it really also depends on, in the top percentile in terms of the final merits. Are you truly at the top of the field at 3 years of experience? Because you're not going to be competing with people who are just at 3 years of experience. You'll be competing with people with all kinds of experience within that field for EB1. And that's the yardstick.
Thank you. Okay. Are all criteria weighed equally?
I think they are in terms of you satisfying them, but I think for different folks, different criteria are going to be important. For industry professional, as we spoke today, your critical role and high salary are going to be extremely important, along with original contributions. I think original contributions are going to be important for everybody. I think everybody should strive to try and get that one, even though it's one of the hardest. But if you're an entrepreneur, selectivity and accelerators, membership, meaning membership will be important. Awards, meaning VC funding, could be very important for them. And your post-money valuation of your company as a founder, that could be very important. For a researcher, I think their authorship in terms of publications and their peer review quality, those things will be very foundational for them. So it depends on your field, but for industry folks, critical role and high salary will be far more important.
Thank you. Having 2 years of experience, will that be a good one to go for EB1A, focusing on authorship, judging, and original contribution?
With such little experience for a researcher, I would see if you can get a work at a research-based type of role in a company like that or an institution, and try to get EB1B if possible through your employer. I think that would be far better versus EB1A. You could try take a chance, but if you look on Reddit and other places like this, if you're arguing 3 criteria, and you're from some of the big research with a lot of citations, they're getting RFEs and denials on a lot of citations. So, make what you will of that. So I would say EB1B. I've encouraged. I don't know why companies don't do it. Obviously, that's a conversation with them. But we have been trying to encourage companies to look into doing that for their research employees.
Yep. Thank you, Rohit. Ex-Amazon and was responsible for creating a feature that allow Alexa to exist. Amazon won't give redact code or doc. What to do in that case for critical role?
I think, in this case, whatever documents you do have, maybe when you got the job offer from Amazon, anything that can relate to the fact that you worked in that division, maybe, of course, letters of recommendation, extremely specific information about what exactly you're responsible for. Anything in the public that, sort of aligns with that letter of recommendation in terms of press releases, anything, case studies, or anything like that, that showcases that letter of recommendation consistent with what you've done, consistent with that outside information, is all consistent. That could be really good. In your own time, I would maybe write, maybe not exactly about that stuff that you did, but maybe about that expertise, in journals, or speak about these types of things, maybe without, ensuring it's, you don't give out proprietary information, but, you want to showcase that you are an expert in this field of expertise, right? And the more authority you have on the outside, and you speak about it, write about it, etc., and then you have a letter of recommendation showcasing that you're responsible for things that you know about, it's far more evidentially strong than not doing any of that stuff and simply having somebody write something. So it's a totality of evidence, circumstantial evidence. And I use this example. We've always taught in law school, you sleep at night and it's white powder in the morning outside. What happened? It snowed, right? You didn't see it snow, but it's, you can come to the conclusion that it did snow. And so, based on the evidence that's provided, is it more likely than not this person is an expert and was part of that critical role? Yes or no? Every criteria doesn't stand alone in a vacuum.
Yeah, thank you. I think we will maybe cover just like 2 more questions, and then we will wrap up. So because we are coming to the time, and what is the approach to ensuring AI assist content doesn't raise red flag with USCIS officers who are trained to spot formula language?
Yeah. I mean, we also have to use AI. I think we should also realize what an advantage it is, but you're right. You have to also be very critical in the way you use it, because it can hallucinate. It gives wrong information, especially in certain areas that are very critical, especially in a field like immigration law. But I think superfluous language I've seen with AI, what is that? Game changer, trailblazing, a lot of flowery language like that has no substance, but it's just talking about stuff without specifics. That can maybe raise, but it doesn't. In my experience, as long as you provide specifics, you provide things, you provide things like graphs and pictures and photos, if possible. I think that would always, be better than just a bunch of AI written language in a petition. And also great evidence. Remember, the petition letter is like a map. The evidence is what they're looking for. So they're looking through the petition letter. They have 20 minutes for each of these. So they're looking quickly and they're seeing, okay, this matches. This is great. This is great. Oh, here's the W-2, right, with the salary. And okay, everything aligns really well. But you should be using AI. Otherwise, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you. The last question I think is good because some people work in the like a contractor for another company. So would being employed as a contractor negatively affect my original contribution? For contact, I design part of original hardware for first electric pickup truck.
I don't necessarily think so, but things should be attributable to you. And as I mentioned earlier, distinguished organizations, right? We've had situations where, an IT consultant who's worked for really well-known clients was not, got RFEs on distinguished organizations. So if you're a contractor that was actually employed by this, of course, you want to make sure that there is evidence of you having been employed through pay stubs. But also, you want to showcase, how you were involved, screenshots of emails, redacted information that showcases, your direct involvement in this. It can still be used as original contribution because ultimately it's something that you are responsible for that was novel in this case in terms of the pickup truck. So it can be. I don't think it's viewed very, very negatively, at all, provided you have the external evidence to showcase this.
Thank you, Rohit. So yeah, we have 1 minute at time. So I would like to also thank you, Rohit, for sharing your expertise and your opinions and answering all the questions today. So if anyone who are interested in getting, do you offer fee evaluation as well?
Yes, for sure. I have, of course, we have a website.
Yeah, the website is here.
Contact me. I will send an evaluation questionnaire that I have for EB1 separately.
Yes.
If you want, I'll send that over. I don't know if I've sent that, but I'll send that over. That's always very helpful for us to get some information. And also, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I do post there often about thoughts about EB1A, what I'm seeing, etc. So feel free to read through, follow that. And my blogs, I have some blogs as well on my website. And I don't know what else. If you want to add something.
Yeah. So I will also send the follow-up email about today's session as well and include the fee evaluation. And yeah, so I know you for maybe a couple of months, and I enjoy reading your blog and your thought toward the helping the industry professional achieving EB1A and also NIW. So yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I've been meaning to. I'm going to write more original contributions that's on my list, and salary and critical role. I do have something out there. So I plan to continue doing that more so. But good luck, everyone. EB1As, EB2NIWs, O1s, whatever it is. Continue doing great work. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the session today. I'll send the follow-up email.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.